investment should not come as another gift away to us just because you have no use to your equipment, and Africa becomes a necessary dumping ground for that.
Due to problems of skill and inefficient communications of the opportunities within the industry, investments remain very low indeed.
I own a media company, but produce my commercials in Kenya because one, quality is higher and it's cheaper.
When you talk about our business press, what exactly does the business press focus on?
If your business has the strength in its shoulders to support those expectations and you have the level of transparency, trust me, there's more than enough capital that's going to flow here.
If we don't make those tough decisions, we will have this conversation again in 10 years.
I believe this underscores the importance of our gathering here today and the theme on which we have gathered to deliberate. Yesterday when we began, we looked at the genesis of the media, the current media landscape, the baggage and constraints that the media has, the reasons why the media should make the shift to take a more entrepreneurial stance in the way that it is organized. And we looked at the way forward. Even as of yesterday, we had begun to take concrete steps because we decided that out of this encounter will come a white paper that charts the way forward on which action will be taken. We are therefore honored to have the minister in our midst this morning to enable us take this process forward. Indeed, yesterday, we identified the fact that no matter the discussions we have here today, unless the underlying structures and institutions are together with us, creating that groundswell and that momentum with which we can move forward, we would just be treading the treadmill, as it were, and remaining in one position. The Honorable Minister is a lawyer, a leader, and an advocate for the media. He has immense experience in the area of media, and he has a passion. Yesterday we talked about passion. He has a passion for moving the media forward and for improving the media landscape in Ghana, both in terms of content, in terms of process, and in terms of the institutions and structures that we deliberated on extensively yesterday. Therefore, we are expecting the minister to help us in looking at the way forward for the media and investors. Honorable Minister, it is my pleasure and honor and joy and privilege to invite you to set the tone for today's deliberations. You are very welcome. Honorable Haruna Idrisu. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Colleague participants, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I rather would be very brief with my protocols, as I have not had the opportunity to be able to put faces and names together, and I trust that I would be forgiven for that. It's my honor and privilege to join you this morning, and let me first of all express my profound appreciation to the organizers, the Voice of Africa Forum, at least for the opportunity to be here and for a speaking opportunity to share with you media and financing or investment opportunities in Ghana. I'm happy to note that the Constitution of Ghana, the 1992 Republican Constitution, guarantees fundamental freedoms, including the independence of the media, and that even the state, we have the National Media Commission, which is a creation of the Constitution subsequent by an Act of Parliament, which is supposed to insulate the state-owned media from governmental control and to ensure that there is fair and equal access to the media landscape by all the stakeholders or players in that industry. Speaking technically from the Ministry of Communication, we have two levels. We have the print media and the electronic media. The electronic media is divided into television and radio. And I'm happy to announce that we have licensed over 218 FM stations in Ghana, with over 198 being operational and functional in Ghana, who are disseminating information and educating and entertaining persons. And we also have 19 licensed television stations, with 8 being very operational and functional. I'm also happy to note, and that becomes an area for investment for those of you who may be interested. I understand that our very good friend from India and Co may be interested. Cabinet just recently gave approval for a roadmap to transit Ghana or migrate from analog radio and television to digital radio and television. So the Ministry of Communication, there is a committee that I'm privileged to chair, is facilitating Ghana's migration from analog radio and television to digital radio and television. Many of you know what the associated benefits are. There will be improvement in content, improvement in picture quality, improvement in sound quality. So of the existing television networks, we are happy to give new additional television licenses. So any person who is desirous of establishing a television or radio station in Ghana on the digital platform can put in a request through the National Communications Authority. We have a very liberalized regime, and we are happy to support you to set up. Now, what we are doing again is that to facilitate this migration process, my call to Cabinet was to allow for a private-public partnership. This is an industry which is largely driven by the private sector. So government will welcome private initiative and investment in that direction to see Ghana through this particular process. Now, I do know that Europe and America have completed their processes of digital migration. My only caution is that we would not tolerate the use of Ghana as a dumping ground for their redundant analog radio and television equipment. So investment should not come as another gift away to us just because you have no use to your equipment, and Africa becomes a necessary dumping ground for that. Now, let me also discuss this in the context of television and radio. Within the telecom industry, we have 6 major operators who are all doing the triple play of voice, data, and content. And we know that the world tomorrow will be driven largely by content. Now, investment opportunities as at this morning, we have a number of WiMAX LTE licenses, long-term evolution on 2.5 on 1.5 per spectrum. And if any person was interested, except that I, for the first time, needed to ensure the protection of Ghanaian participation in that industry, and therefore issued a fiat that 30% of whoever wants to own a WiMAX or an LTE license must have Ghanaian participation of a minimum of 30%. Now, to deploy the infrastructure and equipment is a very challenging activity. I also further requested to the chagrin of the operators that no operator should own a WiMAX or LTE license. I thought that we should create new opportunities for players in that particular industry. We have a tele-density of 75%, manifesting in about 17 million Ghanaians having access to mobile telephony. And all the mobile operators in Ghana do have 3G licenses, so they are able to do additional value-added services. And we expect that very soon. Video as a 3G convergence technology is already a necessary part. Indeed, I must say that access to the internet, even enthusiasm about the internet, until mobile broadband was abysmally very low and poor in Ghana. But thanks to mobile broadband, we've seen a significant improvement to close to 2.53 million Ghanaians now accessing the internet courtesy mobile broadband, maybe because of its immediacy and also the advantage of being present around the corner. There are other opportunities that can still be looked at in that particular area. I must also say that much often than not, Our frustration in Ghana is the focus of our media on sensational, petty, partisan politics. So even issues of business reportage, not too many newspapers will tell you what is happening in the world of business in Ghana in the morning, let alone in the afternoon. Their focus is what the politicians do or do not do. And that also does not allow for some attractiveness to the media industry in Ghana. Now, the other fundamental problem is capacity, financial capacity. Many of our media, if you take a Ghanaian newspaper, the headlines looks good, but the content is not rich enough. I always compare any newspaper I read either to the Financial Times or to the Daily Mail or the New York Tribune, and then you see in terms of analysis. For instance, let me use a very controversial example. I'm yet to see a write-up of any Ghanaian newspaper about the politics in the Arab world of transition from very autocratic regimes into the wave of democracy within that particular region. There's no Ghanaian journalist who has said that, look, I want to specialize on the Arab world. There's no. So professional specialization also becomes a major handicap. And if you come to say that, look, I want to invest to train professional journalists on specific areas, trade and industry, there's a media person who has specialized in it. You want somebody who specializes even in presidential affairs. Somebody can choose that this is the only matter I want to be able to report. So essentially, I'm attempting to give you an overview of what the media landscape looks like in Ghana, except to say that yes, as a public officer, we expect the media to hold all of us accountable to the people of Ghana and to allow for accountability to the Ghanaian people using the media. Fortunately, and I believe that is the thrust of my message, our expectation is that the Ghanaian media must project the positive values and image of our country. We do not have any better country than Ghana, and arguably we have become a beacon of hope and a shining star when it comes to the practice of democracy in sub-Saharan Africa or in Africa. And ours can be equal to any civilized democracy in the world. So Ghana, we have very good positive image. Fortunately for us again, we've become an oil producing country, and there is some interest in what we do with our oil and gas resources. We want to set up some petrochemical industry in that area. Another investment opportunity, I met a business person in Norway just transiting back to Ghana after a conference in Geneva. And even within the Western region, you want to extend some fiber into the affected area and have a submarine cable laid so that even whether it's tallow oil or Cosmos oil, they may be able to do an assessment of production quantities and related issue on a robust ICT infrastructure. So that also becomes an area where any of you may want to be able to invest in that particular area. And you certainly will not make a loss. I mean, if you go to the oil enclave and say that you are setting up a fiber network, you will be able to recoup your money. We will compel the players in that area to hook up to your particular network or connectivity. So that is also another area. Now, in respect of television, there's been recent controversy as to who has, there's certainly not a monopoly in Ghana. You have the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, which is taking advantage of government infrastructure. Itself has what I call a crisis of identity, whether it is a state broadcaster, a commercial broadcaster. They certainly have major problems to deal with. My own take is that in future, we may even want to take the transmission activity from GBC and create it as an independent entity so that all other persons can use the infrastructure and launch onto the delivery of available services. So to our colleagues who came in late, I've already indicated earlier that Ghana is migrating from analog radio and television to digital radio and television, and there are enormous investment opportunities in that area, whether you want to set up a television station or not. And we have reduced the bureaucratic red tape associated with the acquisition of these licenses. Unfortunately, for mobile telephony, we don't seem to have any available spectrum as at this morning. I expect that when we finish the digital migration process, we will have what we call the spectrum dividend, so that we can marshal some additional spectrum from the security and the military to allow for the delivery of those services. I must also say that we have a very well-established legal and regulatory regime in Ghana which promotes fair competition. We have, for instance, under my ministry, the National Communications Authority, under the Ministry of Information, the National Media Commission. But even Media Commission, just yesterday I was sharing with a colleague member of parliament that part of the problem with the Media Commission is funding. They don't have enough resources. Let me finally also note that very soon we will promulgate into law a broadcaster bill in Ghana. In fact, we only commissioned some consultants last week to take a critical review of our broadcasting landscape in Ghana and to regulate it by law. I expect that they will define community, public, and private or commercial FM stations and regulate the parameters of broadcasters generally in Ghana. I expect that we would put the bill before cabinet at least before end of July or June. We should have a paper ready. One of the controversial issues in Ghana is who should award frequency. Should it be the NCA or should it be the National Media Commission? One school of thought says that National Media Commission concentrate on content, and the other says NCA concentrate on the technical issues. So, in summary, Ghana is a very stable, peaceful, democratic country where the rule of law governs the activities of man and the activities of society generally. We respect the sanctity of contracts, so anybody who is coming in to invest must be free to choose Ghana as a destination to do business. Now, my other regret is that many of our financial institutions in Ghana are not supportive of the Ghanaian private sector. That is also another issue I like to bring to the fore. That when you go for any facility, whether a loan, short-term or medium-term, you normally will be asked to bring a collateral which you never have. They are not encouraged. Even the interest rate regime is unacceptably high compared to what pertains in other parts of the world. And that has also been a restraining factor. I thank you for listening, and I will sit by for 5-10 minutes to respond to a number of questions that you may have.
You brought up some of the issues that actually came up yesterday and was discussed in depth, but will still benefit from your input greatly indeed. First question is that you mentioned the licensing, the giving out of licensing, what's it called? The licensing permits. And one of the issues that came up yesterday when talking about the business of media was there was a participant, Mr. Edward Watson, who raised the issue that, you know, maybe considering the size of our markets, we have too many radio stations and too many TV stations, and that can affect the business of media, whether we need to pay attention to content that is developed in the country. So, for instance, there used to be the practice where the understanding was you have, as a content provider, TV station or radio, about 60% of your content has to be in Ghana. Now, the proposal is that it should be a considerable amount. Now, what is a considerable amount? That is subject to a lot of interpretations, and we think that, or the conversation was that that might affect negatively the business of media in the country.
Yeah, thank you. Licenses of television and radio. Like I indicated earlier, we have a very liberalized democratic regime. And fundamental human rights are built on the foundation of freedom of expression and the independence and freedom of the media. These are not freedoms or rights that any government must be encouraged to curtail. And therefore, it will be difficult for us to want to impose limitations. The only thing we can do is to raise the technical bar so that we don't have mushroom FM stations which are not delivering. But if you come to the core activity, we want the radio and television to educate and to entertain. So long as you are able to do that, and you meet certain basic technical requirements, you should be free to operate in Ghana. And let me share a very interesting experience with you. Maybe I was pretty young, I don't know your age, but there were times in Ghana where it took just an announcement at the radio station for governments to be changed. Now, that absolutely was respect of the sovereign rights of the people. Today, I'm not too sure that any misguided soldier man who goes to one of these FM stations can declare that by this action, I'm the president of the republic. So there is good reason why you must have a proliferation of the mass media. And it is not something that this government would want to check, except to say that let's do it to standards, let's do it to technical specifications, and let's do it in a manner which responds to this issue. Now, on broadcasting bill and content, yes, you have an issue. As a Ghanaian, I'm concerned about the debasing of our own moral values and what somebody calls the westernization of our culture. I think that our Ghanaian culture is decent and good, and if we can maintain it, why not? Now, but the tendency is that you have a society where even your own children are more interested in these Western issues than wanting to be Ghanaian. That becomes largely a problem of the breakdown of basic family structures. And you may not want to blame this on government. We, as a society, must decide what we want to do. But I essentially agree with you. I will support a legislation which says considerable. That's ambiguous and that's vague. So when we get there, we'll give a definition to considerable. Maybe reasonable. But reasonable is always defined in legislation. But it means that substantial. We will have to insist on that. But I'm not too sure. When we get to fine-tuning any bill, we should be able to